Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give this a minute or so just to let people jump in. See, there's people coming in the pool now. So we'll give it one or two more minutes.
Good afternoon.
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeffrey Abramowitz. I'm an executive director at Jeff's Human Services in Philadelphia and also secretary for the board of COABE, the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. And I'm here today with, I have the privilege of being with Danielle Cox. Dan, you want to say hello?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I am Danielle Cox. I am the Director of Correctional Education for the Maryland Department of Labor, and I am also the chair of the Prison Literacy Committee for COABE.
Awesome. So welcome today. We are going to have some fun. We're going to be talking about getting talent back to work. So it's really drilling down into, I call them better practices in hiring and retaining justice-involved individuals. So really excited to be here at Intersect 2021. I hope people enjoyed the workshops this morning. The challenge for the next 50 minutes is for you to wear a really different pair of glasses than you wear today. And it's going to be hard sometimes because we see the world sometimes with with the glasses that we wear in a very focused way. But today I want to change it up a little bit because I think in order for us to understand the challenges that men and women have in our justice system, that we really need to put on a very new and different pair of glasses. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So getting men and women back into the workforce involves a lot of different things. But the first thing that's involved is really understanding the challenges and their journey and where they've been. And both Danielle and I wear very different glasses, but there are also a lot of overlap. I wear glasses because I was a lawyer for a long time, over 20 years, and made some bad choices that landed me in a federal penitentiary for 5 years, and then an opportunity to come home and begin teaching GED math, and then becoming a director, and then doing some work with COABE, and here at Jeff's Human Services and Workforce Development, and also with the U.S. Department of Education. So the lens that you have, Danielle, why don't you share a little about the glasses that you wear, because they are different than mine.
So I have actually started out in public education, teaching, moved into juvenile justice and teaching juveniles, and then into the adult program. And I actually taught there, was then an academic coordinator, principal, then moved up as director. So as director, I oversee both the academic program, the occupational program, but also our reentry program, which really focuses on both our occupational and reentry program. What can we do to make sure that our students are able to succeed post-release? What are those different occupational training programs that we can offer? What are those transition classes, reentry classes that we can give them that they will succeed on the outside?
Awesome. So as you say, a little bit different glasses, although they overlap a bit. I would ask you, I know some people are throwing some things in the chat box already. It's great to see some of you. Please feel free, throw a question if you have one in the chat box. I promise we'll try to get to it. And if not, at the very end, you'll get our contact information and you'll be able to reach out that way. So let's get right to it, because I think the first thing we have to understand is the data. Like the new glasses that we wear, what are we looking at? So here's what we're looking at. We're looking at a country that has roughly 70 to 100 million people in the United States that have a criminal history. Wow. We're also looking at a reality that charge, when your criminal history begins, it really starts with the allegation. It starts with that very first time that you get pulled over or that you get a citation and you have to go and answer for it in a court of law. So 70 to 100 million people in the United States is pretty vast. But understanding our new glasses, we should see that know that in the criminal justice space, about 600 to 650,000 people are released each year from the prison system. And that's just a constant churn. And that's in our prison and in our jails. And even more have been released over the past year and a half during COVID-19. So equipping individuals with the skills that they need and talent. Danielle, I want to bring you in on this as well, because, it begins with life behind bars. And they say that reentry starts the very first day you're incarcerated. And I do believe that, if not before, even before you step inside. But most of the population that's behind our walls comes home, and over 94% are going to come home, and at some point in time. So some may serve short sentences, some a little bit longer. But in order to get people prepared, if we don't do something behind the walls, what do we think is really going to happen when people come home? They're going to struggle. And I'm curious, Danielle, from your perspective, what's education like behind the bars for the people that walk in their first stay when they first start getting off the ground?
Well, in Maryland, what we have seen, if any resident, we are trying to move away, obviously, from the word inmate, so we use returning citizen or resident, comes in, and if their first time behind the fence, they actually are what we call mandatory students. So they are required to take a minimum of 240 days of education. And what we are seeing is that's if they don't have a GED or a high school diploma. And what we're seeing then is that with that 240 days, it used to be 120, is if we can get them that long, they'll stay after that. They'll want to continue. They'll be that close to getting that GED or high school diploma that they will want to stay in. Then once they see, we actually have them talk to teachers in our occupational classes while they're in the academic classes. We try to immerse them into a career pathway so that they can see what are those things that I can take that will help me succeed back in my community. What are some of those interests? We have them take the ONET survey so that they can see what some of those interests are post release, and then actually get into an occupational training course. And then afterwards, we make sure to take and put them in to what we call our pipeline of services, from academic to occupational training to reentry, so that they can learn some of those skills that they need for such as making a resume, some of those skills that they need for interviewing and that sort of thing before they're actually released to the outside. And we're seeing great success with that when we look at their success post-release, and we look at their ability to get a job and keep a job and make sure that job has a wage that will be livable.
Danielle, I did some amazing things when I was behind the walls. Besides teaching so many classes while I was away, I also learned how to drive a truck and operate a forklift and work in a warehouse and in a kitchen and all these crazy things that I never would have expected to be able to learn how to do. But there's a reality here, and I was wondering if you might be able to comment on this, that only 23% of men and women behind the walls actually participate in training. And I'm wondering, are you starting to see a trend in that? Is that starting to change? And if so, why and how?
We are seeing a trend into the good with that. And one of the reason is we have now hired what we call our reentry navigators. So previously, what we were seeing was only our students that were going through the academic classes were actually then funneling into the occupational. And we weren't able to touch those guys who actually came into prison already having a GED or high school diploma. So it was like, how do we reach them, right? So because we were only getting a certain portion of the population. So what we did with the help of our DOC, because we're the Department of Labor, is we actually joined forces. We hire reentry navigators who go out and they are able to speak to guys who are, or women who are nearest to release, and tell them about all the great different opportunities that we have in occupational training. And then say there's something, say their facility only has HVAC and welding, but they're interested in roofing. Then what we do is we work with case management to get them moved to another a facility that offers that, so that they can actually then take that course and that training that they're interested in. And all of ours are pre-apprenticeships. And then our reentry navigators, once they go through those classes, they actually connect them then with either apprenticeships on the outside or actual jobs. So we ask them, okay, what do you want to do? Would you rather do, when you get released, go into and learn more with your education and go into that apprenticeship, or with the certification that you have right now, would you rather go ahead and get a job on the outside? So those reentry navigators have been the key to opening up, getting us additional students for those classes.
Cool. Good stuff. Yeah, I think that when we talk about education, because we and the blending, I mean, that's why we're doing this whole thing today, right? It's to connect education and workforce development. We have to understand that low literacy skills and are generally going to give someone eight times more likely chance of being incarcerated. And that's kind of incredible when you think about the number of people and the skill levels that people come into the prison system with. But it gets, I mean, just a little bit. If we were just able to push a little bit inside, we'd be able to give them a 43% better chance of not going back by giving them one class, just one educational class, to help them navigate what's next in that and in their world. And then understanding it when it comes to the workforce, that by 2021, it's actually 2024 now, about 63% of all jobs are going to require more than a high school equivalency, a high school diploma. So we're really going to be asking them to skill up and to get even smarter inside of prison to be able to do the jobs that are on the outside. The tragedy is that our unemployment rate today is at, we're at 4.6 roughly in the United States today in unemployment. But traditionally, for men and women that have been incarcerated, that unemployment rate is 27%. Now that's higher than the peak of the Great Depression. And that is something that was a challenge before COVID, and quite frankly, is going to be a super challenge after COVID as we talk about getting men and women back into the workforce. And the reality from that perspective is that there are just so many barriers. There's so many barriers for people coming home, documented barriers of over 44,000 barriers that stand in somebody's way of really making that next step to the job or to a career or being successful or keeping your hands out. And they're involved, we'll talk about some of these today, but housing and education and financial challenges and licensing, occupational licensing. But about 70% of the barriers that exist for reentry are all employment related, which is there's a great book by Jeff Korsenik. It's called Getting Talent Back to Work. And Jeff is a friend at Fifth Third Bank in Chicago. And Jeff made a point recently of showing financially, it makes economic sense to start investing in this talent pool of men and women that are going through the criminal justice system or that have a criminal background. And we need to get them back to work. We need to do whatever we can to connect them to not just jobs, because I don't believe in jobs. I believe in careers. When we talk about reentry, putting someone just in a job just doesn't cut it anymore. They have to find something with a career pathway. Agree?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what are the barriers? And I'm hoping, Danielle, you can help me navigate some of these, because I really think it's important for employers and people in education really to understand maybe what is obvious and then maybe not so obvious. Obviously, people come home, they have a criminal background, right? So anyone can Google them or they can do a background check on them. And that often stands in the way of them finding that career opportunity, sometimes even going to school because we're taking up a certain trade. No question that digital literacy, and I think we've come a little bit further on digital literacy, but I've yet to really understand why digital literacy is just not mandated for every single person that's behind our walls and when they come out, because it's such a crucial part of them reintegrating. Just being able to access a computer, to file it, to get a job application online, to do your resume and all those pieces. And then there are other things that are a little even as challenging. Education, Danielle, and knowing or having that background in education, that skill set. And I'm curious, like from what you see in the work you do behind the walls, how important is education as they walk out the door?
I think one of the most important things And I say one, we used to always say education, number one important thing, right? And typically that would be the case for, I think, just the general average Joe. But for these guys, there are so many different barriers that education is one of those important things. But you can give them an education, you can give them all the training that you want and all the different certifications. But if they can't get out and actually then get a job or have the ability to have transportation to that job, have the therapy they need for those addiction issues, have a house that they can live in so that they can come home to, then you giving them that education will not help, will not be the only key. And I will tell you, one of the biggest things that we saw that we are actively working on is not so much that one of those barriers are, and I see it's not in here, that's why I'm going to say it, is where their parole office is. So if you have a job on the other side of town from your parole officers, and how are you going to go check in with them at lunchtime if it's whole way across town? That's a 35, 45-minute drive across, you have a 30-minute lunch break. So what we've tried to do is work with the parole office to make sure that they actually can go, instead of having their check-in be where near they live, have that check-in be where they work. So having those parole officers right beside where their job is instead of where their house is. I found that has extremely helped also.
Yeah, here in Pennsylvania, we recently have all our parole officers remotely at a state level, and they're actually driving wherever, whether it's to their home or wherever, to try and check in, even in a parking lot somewhere that's convenient. So many of these challenges and these barriers, though, the simple things like identification and having identification when you come home, really important to understand that, you can't get hired without a driver's license or state identification. And then again, those supervision restrictions. I was surprised to learn recently that 48% of all those men and women behind the walls are actually there on technical violations or parole violations. And that's something that we really have to think about changing and modifying, especially with COVID. Somebody raised an issue in the chat about behavioral health and the trauma of prison. And I think that's something that is not so obvious, that we don't think about the trauma when people come home and the support that they might need with behavioral health as well as physical health. I know to this day, I still wake up to at least 4 or 5 times a night to keys jiggling in my head because the officer's going through at count time. Those are little things that probably will stay with people for a lifetime, but just understanding it, just put their glasses on, just seeing their glasses are really important. Employers today are doing things like getting credit reports on people, and those things often are a big challenge because many people don't have a very good credit score when they come home, if they have one at all. And navigating those, I think the purpose of this slide and to understand is that generally it takes a village, right? This isn't about just a job. And if we hire people to get to work for us in our employment, that we have to be prepared to see what there is to see and to be able to help them navigate what those challenges are and get over them so that they can move forward with not only being a good employee, but really advancing in the company so that they can be one of your rock stars. And
Jeff,
it really starts with the foundation. Sure, go ahead.
I might just quickly talk about the trauma thing. One of the things that we just institute, and I don't really have data on right now because we're just starting it, is actually looking at cognitive behavioral therapy. So we're actually looking at using our tablets as part of that and going through with the teacher classes on trauma, classes on addiction, classes on those type of things that they normally will not get prior to release, that they would actively have to seek out after release, that we know normally does not happen. So that is something that we are currently instituting to look into that trauma issue. So you're right, whoever had put that in the chat, that is something that definitely needs to be addressed in prisons across the nation.
Yeah. When we talk about that too, we really talk about what the foundation is. Like, what is it that makes someone successful when they come home? And part of that is, getting those basic literacy skills, not just digital literacy, but reading and math support. Getting your high school equivalency or that GED. And I've seen people struggle, not and get so close. Like they'll have been down for 5, 6, 7 years, and then they'll get to that last section, and all of a sudden they get their release. And they go home, and the last thing on their bucket list is to get that high school equivalency because they have so many other things going on. So, what we need to be mindful of is whatever we do inside, there needs to be a connector on the outside so that those people can have that continuum of care that can make them successful. And sometimes it's really simple. It's just upskilling. Look, I was away and I started teaching GED math inside the walls, and I had to relearn everything. Like, I didn't know Pythagorean theorem. I hadn't done it since I was in high school. And those kinds of things, those skill sets where you have to go back and relearn them and educate yourself, I call it upskilling. But upskilling is part of getting people back to work. It's getting them into those opportunities where they can be successful. And some of that is career and technical training in not just anything. Look, men and women that are inside, generally and often, because there's so little programming at some facilities, they say, you know what, I'll take anything. I'll take anything. I'll do anything. And that's so hard. And it's so bad because it can't be about I'll do anything. It's got to be, people stay at those jobs because they love to do them. They don't stay there because, sometimes because a lot of money, but they stay at those jobs because they love to do them. And that's their career. And that's the way we have to start thinking as employers. When you're interviewing and you're meeting with prospective candidates, your first question really should be, what do you love to do? Because if you can get somebody that loves to go in, and I was just up at a chocolate factory a few days ago, and I could definitely work there because I got such a sweet tooth. But I would love to work in that kind of environment, just making and creating chocolate all day long. And if you could find somebody that's got that same passion as your company, then that's where success lies.
And I think that's why it's so important to do those interest surveys, those interest profiles like the ONET, Jeff, before they take occupational training. So that way they know what they want to go into. We get them that training in that thing that we know they'll be successful because it'll be something they love.
Yeah, so Danielle, let's talk about that for a second, because I think it's really interesting, the fact that a lot of people that I work with, they don't know what they don't know. Like when I tell them that you could be a drone operator, you could go and fly drones all day and you can make a fortune, just surveying properties all day. And that, I think it really takes us to educate people as to the different vocations that are out there.
Absolutely.
And there's a slide that we have later on about those high priority job sectors or industry sectors, like getting to what's really, those jobs are going to be around for decades. That's what where you want to target. So why hire somebody? I get this all the time. Like, why should we hire somebody with a background? And there's some basic sense ones that we have. We dig a little bit deeper into that. But first, there's a talent pool. There's men and women that have done those jobs for sometimes decades before they made some bad choices, right? And that got them into prison. And now that they're home, they got this talent. I remember I learned so much from a guy named Santos who actually taught me how to take a car apart and put it back together, because I worked in the garage and this guy could literally do it blindfolded. But more importantly, what he did was he showed me that the tricks of the trade, like how those tools that were specifically geared for changing brakes and how you loosen a brake just appropriate. It took years and years of experience. So I think the first reason is that you want to get talented and qualified individuals. That's number one. Second is that you want to give people a chance to succeed in life. We have a third of our country that has a criminal background. Imagine if we didn't give an opportunity to any of them, where we would be. The third I have is improving the community, because I think this is a community problem. This isn't just a problem of people that are going through a system or that are justice involved. And I want to read you something. 1 in 5 Americans have a criminal background, but there's a great report that just came out, and it talked about the aggregate loss. What's the financial loss to our community? And $372 billion a year is lost in revenue because of men and women that are justice involved, not just inside, but outside. So I want to put it in context because I was shocked at this. So in context, that amount of money, $372.3 billion, would close New York City poverty gap 60 times over. That amount of money could give every homeless person in our country, in the US, a house worth $500,000 outright with money to spare. That amount of money could fund NASA for 15 years and get us back to the moon. So put it in perspective, financially, this just makes sense, right? As a country, we need to start engaging and bringing revenue back into the population that really has often seen as the drain to society because they're on benefits oftentimes and other things. So we need to look at those numbers, and we really need to take a step back. And I want to mention right here, because I think it's a good place to put it, is that it should be all over every slide. I call it diversity and confusion. And I think we need to be clear about this, is that, we have our Black and Latina populations in the United States account for about 30% of our entire population. And yet they're about 65% of the men and women that are behind the walls. So there's no question whatsoever that this isn't a diversity and equity issue. And it's the people at the very bottom of the ladder that often need the most support and help to get out of this. So I want to call it out, and I want to recognize it, that it's those individuals that often didn't have a very good education and didn't have those support systems in place that are the ones that we're talking about, that are getting a skill set and getting that career pathway.
And Jeff, if I might quickly add,
Yeah.
one of the great ways to show employers like how great these guys are, because they will truly probably be your best worker if you give them the chance, is to have within our facilities job fairs where employers come in and not only have the employers present the information to the returning citizens, but also have the returning citizens sell themselves to those employers and make sure those employers you're bringing in are connect to not only the occupational training that you're giving them, but those high paying jobs that are in demand also.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit when we talk about high demand sectors and what are the hot sectors now to engage in the workforce. But I think we have to look at the hiring practices that we have first, and we have to talk about what's really being done in the field. And over the course of the last few months, I've been approached time and time again saying, Mr. A, we want to open our employment up. We want to start looking at, we've never had anyone that's been reentry before or has been involved in the justice system. We have to look at our human resource systems, and we have to start saying, this has got to change. We have to first look at the individual, and then we have to decide if the individual is qualified and they're ready for the job, then can they do the job? But in job applications, we shouldn't be asking the question, do you have a criminal background? We should be asking the question, is this what you want to do? Is this what you love to do? Are you qualified to do it? Do you have a skill set and passion to do it? Or do you want to learn it? And do you want to be successful? So those are the things from an HR perspective. And yet we run into this brick wall because oftentimes states have occupational licensing that don't allow us to get there. They say, oh, you know what? Well, if you're in the healthcare field, you can't have a criminal background. And if you do this job, you can't have a background. And occupational licensing's got to change, and it's got to change at a state level because feds don't control that. The occupational licensing requirements of each state needs to be looked at, and we need to decide, does it make sense? Pennsylvania just went through a revamp recently last July, where we said, you know what, we're going to take out the clauses that blanketly exclude somebody from a job. And then we're going to look deeper, let them go and apply. And let's look at them on a case-by-case basis. does this affect, can they legally do their job based upon the work that's being done, and make sure there's a correlation between the two. The second is looking at federal and state laws on pardons and expungements. These are things that certainly can help people, get a cleaner record, and, look at their, make sure that their background is cleaner, things that could come off that give them that opportunity. I am not a huge fan of ban the box, although I am of clean slate. So ban the box is where you can ask the question. In some cities, in Philadelphia, you can't ask the question, do you have a criminal background? As a matter of fact, you can't ask the question until I say, Danielle, I want to hire you at $10 an hour, and I need to ask you, is there anything in your background that would prohibit you from doing the job? So ban the box has a double-edged sword to it. And the reason why I don't like ban the box is because there was a study in University of Michigan that said what happens when you have ban the boxes, you have employers making an assumption based on the looks or appearance of someone. And I think that's just wrong in and of itself, but it also encourages people not to be honest. And as employers, isn't that really what we want? We want candidates to walk in and say, I want to be honest. I want to work here. I want to tell you everything. And here's my story. If we can just give candidates that safe space to tell their story so that you can hear it and understand what drives them, what makes them move. Wow, how impactful that would be about getting people into the workforce. And then the same thing with background checks and drug screens. I think that we do background checks, and in most states we have to do them in some circumstances. But how you interpret them is really the big thing. You don't have to look back till someone was 12 or 15 or 16 years old and say, oh, you did this when you were 15 years old. You're not qualified to do now. You're 55 years old. And what we're finding, really, what's happening now, quite honestly, is people that have been out of the workforce because of COVID, because their company shut down or they got laid off, they're coming back into the workforce older in life. And really, they're being faced with the same challenges as people that just gone through the justice system, because they have something on their record that may have been a bad choice they made sometime in life when they were very young. And now it's coming back and they have to explain it and deal with it. So these are the kinds of things that, as people cross that bridge from reentry to work into a career and being successful, these are the things that I want you to try to be mindful of. And even SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, is beginning to make real headway in trying to convince HR specialists that you need to look deeper. So the glasses that we see today, and Danielle, I'm going to ask you to jump in here, because the glasses that we see are those of looking at a whole village, right? I was wondering, Danielle, you walk through some of the challenges that men and women go through as they navigate coming home. And you see it kind of behind the walls. And I'm wondering, what's the correlation of how we're prepping them when they come home, and how can we assist or do a better job when they get there to help them overcome all these other challenges like the housing and the skill training and clothing and all those basic needs supports?
I think one of the big things to do is to make sure that we are addressing everything that they need to know, right? So what are those different barriers? Not just taking and teaching the curriculum that we have, but also asking for their input. What are some things that that you're going to have, pop up when you get out, and addressing those head on. And our reentry navigators do a great job at meeting. So they work for our American Job Centers on the outside. They meet with the inmates on the inside to have that relationship, figure out what they're interested in, have those connections with employers so that once that person is released, not only do they now have that interview set up with those employers, because those navigators have those relationships with those employers, they've also helped them to figure out that transitional housing, where they're going to go once they're released. They make sure that they have the skills and training for that job that they want. They also work with the DOC to make sure that they have their ID, that they have their social security card. We have people or community providers that have clothing such as suits for interviews, that sort of thing. They make sure that that has been set up prior to that. And the legal support, I think you bring up a big one there, Jeff, because that can actually amount to, I can't get my driver's license because I still owe back child support, to something bigger, right? So it's making sure that they are able to connect with them when they get out, to make sure that they're able to help them with those legal issues, or at least get them to somebody who can help them with those legal issues, because that can be the biggest barrier. One of the biggest barrier to employment is
Yeah.
any of those outstanding legal issues.
So I want to add a 7. So we have 6 boxes. I'm going to add a 7th one because I really agree. There's a few people that mentioned the mindset. A person's mindset and how important that is coming home. And so I can't emphasize enough how important that is. And it's really frustrating. Look, I lived in a halfway system when I came home, a halfway house system where I was more incarcerated in the halfway house than I was in prison. And I had a challenge. My challenge of the day was often finding toilet paper when I went to the bathroom. So those things are really hard because you think you're home, but you're not really home. And everywhere you go, you're reminded of your number and who you are. Now, I will always be my number. I get that part. There's a part of me that will always be that way. But the mindset of people coming home, they need to understand that you're not going to hit the home run the second you walk home. When you get home, you need to chip away at these. And every day, if you can just have one thing on your plate you want to concentrate about, if you just want to take one step forward, it takes time. It's not easy. And the mindset that I work with many men and women that are coming home. And the one thing I tell them is that, just be patient. You're going to need to really dig down to some really basic things. And that mindset is always about having your glass half filled than half empty. I always say to them when people come to see me, I say, you know what? My worst day on the outside is better than my best day on the inside. And it's really true because, you're home and you're with your family and you're figuring it out and you're moving forward. So that mindset piece can't be underemphasized, and I really want to, or overemphasized. So I really want you to I will add that, I promise, as one of these boxes because I think it's really important part of it.
Absolutely, Jeff. And I just want to quickly add, one of the things that we hear so often is when I leave, one of my biggest barriers is going to be the fact that I've been behind bars for 20 years, but everything has continued without me out there. So now how do I fit in, right? So just getting through that is, definitely something we all need to address, in a better way.
And it's hard too. Somebody made a comment about, the fact that not everybody's family wants them home. And sometimes your crime involved family and hurt people. And it takes a while. And that's been a struggle for me personally. But the way I look at it is I did my time and I never want to be judged on my past. I really look at and it really isn't about the past. And we all make choices in life that take us a certain way. It's really about the lessons that you learned along the way. And I hope that people take some time to reconnect with family, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. I just recently reconnected with my sister after a number of years where we had not talked. But it just takes time, and people should be encouraged to stick with their family and, try and work through it and have discussions and be out there. And that's the same thing with your employers. When you're talking about working for people, and it's almost like family. Look, you spend almost as much time with your employer and at job than you do anything else in your life, more than your family. So really understanding that, that's your new family and your new environment. And it's hard in both ways. So I'm about to leave for another conference I'm speaking at today, but and it's all employers. And I want them to understand that to change the narrative isn't just changing the narrative at the top with the CEO. It's changing the narrative all the way down, because often what happens is men and women that your coworkers are working with will Google you, or they'll Google a new employee, see what they were all about, and they'll find out. And then it's a culture, and that culture change has to happen all across employment, not just saying, I want to be reentry friendly. It's saying, I want to be reentry friendly, but I want to be friendly to everyone. I want to be friendly to those people that are just that are disabled. I want to be friendly to those people that are, may have a disability. It's opening that door really wide to people that you've not touched before and not open that door. But part of that is understanding that you need to be specific when there are some industry sectors that are just not ready to open the door up. And those are the sectors that you need to think about when you talk about getting somebody back to work. Why in the world would we ever send someone to work into a job that's not going to exist 5 years from now? Why? We just saw over the last few days the infrastructure bill that's being passed and going to be signed. Well, the biggest tragedy of the bill would be is if the people that need those jobs most, the people that need the jobs most in this world don't have the education to get them. So we have to really think about upskilling them and getting them into those positions where, those dollars where we're talking about, building bridges and where all that money's going to, those are the people that should be our target and getting them smarter along the way. So Danielle, I'm throwing you out this one because I really want to hear, I'm curious, but we know that I call it the COVID pivot, but the past year and a half, 2 years has been really challenging when it comes to COVID behind the walls. And I wanted to hear your take. How prepared are men and women as they leave facilities for dealing with COVID and getting back into the workforce?
Oh, well, I mean, it's been difficult, right? I think for both them as students and us as teachers, administrators, workforce development space, because we've lost so much time. I know that there are some places that were able to implement virtual learning, right? Because they already had that in place, some piece of it in place that they could easily, go into that space. But then there's others like Maryland that we have no technology behind the fence. We just recently got a ton of tablets, but they're not able to actually do virtual instruction with us and the student behind the fence. So very difficult because we know that they have lost a lot, just like our students in public ed have lost a lot over that time period. However, we are trying our best now that we are back to get back to where they need to be. And I think one of the positives is that during that 15 months that we were out, we've spent so much time doing professional development with our teachers, both to be able to understand their students better, on cultural competency, on teaching and learning, on being effective leaders. We even did professional development on what to expect when we return with our students, possibly sliding back a level in that academic space. But one of the great things is that we got a multi-million-dollar RFP for tablets passed. So we are able now to move forward with digital literacy. So some good things and some bad things. But I do see where also we saw where a bunch of guys and women left without a GED because they were released before they could get one. We saw ones who left without getting that reentry support because we were out. So there is a population who has lost out on getting some of that the support that they truly really needed due to COVID. But now we do have to teach them, okay, how do we now, as you're leaving now, deal with a pandemic when you leave, right? What are those things that you're going to see in the workplace with PPE, right? With social distancing? What are some of the things that you're going to have to make sure that you're prepared for once you release? But they should be pretty prepared because they've been doing it now for the past 15 months behind the fence, wearing masks.
Yeah, so for sure, I think one of the other things that people have to know as they come home is that the world is their oyster, right? Is right now there are so many jobs in the workforce and there's so much opportunity out there. Now is the time to jump because not everybody in the country is engaging and jobs are often in labor especially is in high demand. And now is the time that if they can get into the market today, that they're going to be the supervisors of tomorrow. Don't wait until everyone jumps back into the labor market. Do it now when you have an opportunity to come in to learn the grassroots and work up the ladder quickly, because those are the positions that are going to be the supervisory, the management positions going forward. Really
Absolutely,
important.
Jeff. Our reentry navigators have gotten more returning citizens employed in the past 5 months than they did for one of the entire years prior to COVID, FY20.
Yeah, and good positions that are open now too.
Absolutely.
These are some of the slide that just shows some of the people that we've worked with. But Johnson Controls, an HVAC provider, is putting people back to work. We work with a manufacturing plant, and these are all opportunities where people are engaged. And there's one picture I always show because I love it. Is just a gentleman who is making bananas Foster at Edwin's in Chicago and Cleveland. And yeah, the smile on his face when he got done it. This is a restaurant that's all reentry. It's all men and women that have done some time and really are making the world a different and better place. So a lot of things some things you had mentioned, Danielle. One is this notion of doing training behind the walls. But if you're not familiar, I do some work with the Department of Education now as a subject matter expert. And IET and integrated educational training are the big things right now. We launched 6 of them across the country this summer. Integrated educational training is where a math instructor is teaching math and fractions while the carpentry instructor is teaching carpentry. And what a perfect fit, what a great model. And thinking about things like that. Now, true, the post-secondary and thinking about getting to college, the GED, the Pell Grant initiative was passed. It's going to be in the next 2 years. That door is going to be opening up. Peer mentoring and connecting people to peers at work and at home can be so effective and so important. But I really think one of the keys is, one, being innovative, and 2, connecting people on the inside with the support services they need on the outside. And if you could do that successfully, man, you're going to be getting some talent back to work for sure.
And
I
can
want
I
to
make
encourage.
one quick suggestion too, Jeff, is connect with one of the good things with Maryland is correctional ed is within the Maryland Department of Labor, which houses the apprenticeship program, workforce development, and all those great different departments that you need to have that connection to. So if you're part of DOC or whoever, make sure you get that connection with your workforce development in the state. That will be a great thing for your program, is to make sure that you have those connections.
So we only have a few minutes left, but I want to run through just a few of these. One is, if you've not done this yet, SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management. If you're an employer on here or you're not an employer, I don't care. Get on and take the SHRM, Getting Talent Back to Work certification. It's a 10-module course. It's totally free, and it is awesome because it really will show you what employers need to know when hiring people that are coming home or with a justice background. I mentioned Links. If you're not a member of Links, Links is the community of practice for the Department of Education, and I moderate the Correctional and Reentry Education Community of Practice. Get on it. It's links.ed.gov. Get on there. We have some great discussions. We're connecting with employers and other people that are in the pool for hiring returning citizens, and really important. Also, Google. Google has Grow with Google, a career readiness and reentry platform. It's really simple. It's easy for people to get onto, and it's both for people that are coming home that are just as involved, as well as those that are doing work in this space. So check it out. Grow with Google, their career readiness. Can it be better? Yeah, it can, but and we're making so many strides. I couldn't imagine 5 years ago Google jumping into this pool to be able to share resources and help people that are coming home. So one last thing is, we want to be able to see people as we drive our cars and wear those new glasses, and that means adult literacy providers. Crucial. Career one-stops, or our career one-stops across the country, American Job Centers, community colleges, apprenticeships, employers, and union. This takes a village. We are going to need a village to get out of this, because it was a village that got us into it. And now we need to chip away and make it happen. I will tell you, there's a wealth of resources that Danielle and I will be sharing with you, and we'll make sure that the presentation is all provided to everybody that would like it. And I know that including the name of the book for Jeff Korsenick, Getting Talent Back to Work, and some other books that we have that could be really interesting. Also check out Danielle's committee. COABE has a committee for literacy behind and beyond the prison walls. And I'm sure she's looking for as many people as she can on that committee. So I hope you'll jump in there. And then my contact information at COABE, or just go onto COABE's page. Both Danielle and our contact information is on the COABE page because we both are on the board at COABE. So I hope we're just about at time, but I want to thank everybody. Danielle, I'm leaving it to you for some final words.
Really quick plug. The Prison Literacy Committee created a website for career pathways that is a great resource for pretty much anything you would need to know, whether you're an educator, administrator, a employer partner, a student, a returning citizen. It deals with the different sectors. It's a great resource to see, and that's actually on COABE's Prison Literacy page. You can actually connect to it. So I would suggest, to go out and take a look at that. Also, again, just make sure that you're getting those partnerships, no matter what it might be in, whether it be in different, like Jeff was saying, the colleges, workforce development, DOC, so that everybody is working together, because it does take all of us. We can never all do it by ourselves, and certainly not right now as we're trying to pull out of this pandemic.
So it is 1:50. We are right on time. And I thank everybody for joining us today. And I look forward to working with everybody in the future. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them to us. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you all.